MEP Kathleen Funchion, thank you so much for joining us on Agriland. We're here in Strasbourg at the plenary session of the European Parliament, and for our audience back home, which is primarily farmers and rural dwellers, as we say, they're wondering what their MEPs are doing for them in Europe. So some of the topics that have come up over the plenary session over these few days have been around trade and safeguards, in particular for Mercosur. Now I know you and your colleagues have always been opposed to Mercosur, but you voted against the safeguards yesterday. So can you explain that to our farmers?
Yeah, so first of all, I think we have a really good, strong record on being opposed to Mercosur. It was also the left MEPs, which is myself and Lynn, obviously, in Sinn Féin, but also Luke Flanagan. It was our group that brought forward that case for Mercosur to be referred to the European Court of Justice. So, I think we have a really good record in relation to that. I suppose I look back at my own background, which is a trade union background, and I think when you're talking about safeguards, you're in a dangerous zone, because you're in a zone that you're accepting a lot less than what you should be accepting. I also think if you look at the EU's track record on other agreements and how they have met their criteria and obligations, they've totally failed. So I wouldn't have any confidence that if you needed to invoke these safeguards, that they would actually be done. If you look at the EU-Israel trade agreement, they haven't stopped that. There was a lot of talk last year that they were going to look for a partial suspension, but under current existing international law, that agreement should be stalled. They haven't done that. So why would we have confidence that if Mercosur goes through and you need to invoke the safeguards, how would you have confidence? I don't have confidence that they would do it. I also think it's a smokescreen. I think it's a really bad deal. It's a bad deal, as your own audience will know, for farmers. A lot of people are very concerned at the amount of emails we're getting from people that are not from a farming background in relation to the food quality, and they're concerned about that. And we have such a high standard in Ireland, and at times I think it's taken for granted, and people don't realise maybe that the standard is different in other countries. So that has been very interesting to see as well. And then we know that there's issues around the climate. So there's a lot of different people that have concerns. I wouldn't have any confidence in the EU that they would invoke any of these safeguards if they were needed. I don't think it goes far enough, and I think we need to be still fighting really hard against the deal. We saw the amount of pressure that was put on and how that vote went in relation to the deal being referred to the European Court of Justice. That's the pressure and momentum we need to keep on now for when it does come to the Parliament for an overall vote, that we can reject this deal and go back to the table. I wouldn't want to be settling for safeguards in any way, shape or form. We need to see this deal scrapped and a reworking altogether.
And what can you and your colleagues do in terms of the CAP negotiations now? Well, the MFF negotiations of the budget, and trying to secure enough resourcing and enough funding for farmers in the next CAP, which has already been reduced since the last CAP.
Yeah, so there's huge issues around CAP, because there's also never been any increase in relation to inflation. And look how much, when you see everyone is affected by the cost of living, and if you even just look at the last 2 years, and there's been absolutely no increase. So already, people are not having enough, let's say. There's a lot of concerns around the talk of potentially getting rid of Pillar 2. I think a lot of people don't realise as well that other programmes that really benefit rural areas and rural communities are funded through that too, like the Leader programme. It's one I always try and talk about, because just to get the awareness out there as well, that if Pillar 2 goes, does that mean funding for Leader goes? What about all the various projects there involved in rural communities? So there's a responsibility on those of us that are, here. There's 14 Irish MEPs. I would hope that we'd all be singing from the same hymn sheet in relation to this, but certainly from ourselves in Sinn Féin and for the left group, you can be guaranteed that we will be fighting very hard to not just retain anything that is there in relation to CAP, but to have increases and to ensure like that they don't get rid of certain schemes and certain aspects of it. And I would always have a concern there as well, when they talk about maybe streamlining or rationalisation, that's, translation for cuts. So I think it's really important. And also in the context of how Europe is going, there is huge talk about constantly increasing the budgets around military, around defence, around security. If that is the case, then what funds are going to suffer? So I think it's really, really important as well that we call that out, because we don't want money that should be going to CAP and that should be going to other funds being diverted into military and defence.
Kathleen Funchion, thank you very much for joining us on Agriland.
Thank you.